Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday live stream. I'm Mary Rose Wood. I'm here to talk to you about writing craft, story structure, and all those cool things that we storytellers concern ourselves with. Before we get started, if you're watching on Facebook, please go to streamyard.com/Facebook and get permission to show your name. It's just the friendly thing to do. This way I'll know you're here. I so enjoy these Wednesday live streams, not only because I love spending time with you all out there and creating content that is designed to help you be the writer that you dream of being, to get the training that you need to clarify some of the common questions that writers have. And believe me, we all have the same struggles. We all have to literally walk that same path of the storyteller to fulfill our dreams of writing, not just because we feel like it, but because we want to say something, we want to connect, we want to communicate with others. So that's why we gather here, and I'm very, very glad to see some of you waving hi to Terry. It's nice to see you in the comments already, so please feel free to say hi. Let me know who's out there. Our subject today has to do with connecting. It has to do with communicating. It has to do with being close. That is our subject today. And I want to start out by sharing something that one of my students at Path of the Storyteller shared with me not long ago, an experience that she had that quite honestly got me a little worked up. It got my fierce mama bear writing mentor energy activated. And she told me a story of having submitted a manuscript to, I believe, an agent. And probably it wasn't a whole manuscript, it was sample pages. And the agent gave her feedback, which is generous and good. Agents are busy. It's always nice when they take the time to give feedback. But the feedback that they gave her was not helpful. The feedback was, this is okay, but I would really like to read it in the first person. So from that, we can deduce that she had written a manuscript. I happen to know she'd gotten a full draft done in the third person point of view, submitted sample pages to an agent. The agent said, it's not bad, but I'd rather see it in the first person. What does a writer do with feedback like that? If you're not that experienced and if you're not that confident, you might end up doing something that like this. You might end up saying, oh, well, the agent knows better than I do, both what's wrong with my manuscript and how to fix it. So I'm going to sit down and I'm going to rewrite it in the first person because that's what it needs. That's why it doesn't have any traction. Now, those of you who've been hanging out with me on these great little talks on Wednesdays know that point of view is not so simple. It's not a search and replace. We don't just go through and change all the she said to I said and call it a switch to first person. Oh no, it is much more complicated than that. But it's the kind of comment that was tossed off by an agent who might have done better to say this. The agent might have said, I'm interested in your book. The premise intrigues me. Your voice intrigues me. You intrigue me. Whatever, wherever the interest came from. However, in these pages, I don't feel close enough to your main character. I wish that I felt closer to your main character. And if that agent had said that and put a full period at the end of the sentence and signed, your friend, agent, and send it back to the writer, then the writer has a choice. The writer can say, I wonder if that agent has a point. I wonder if there's something about the way that I wrote this that does not bring my reader, for whom it is all for, right? So it's all for the reader, into sufficient proximity with my main character. Interesting. That's an interesting problem. How do I solve it? Then that writer gets to go on a creative journey, right? That writer gets to contemplate what she's written, contemplate her goals for the piece, think about what her original intentions were and how they compare to what she's actually executed, right? That writer has a choice. In this case, the agent diagnosed what was wrong with the manuscript and prescribed the fix. And in this case, the agent misspoke. And thanks to the agent misspeaking, a good writer wasted a lot of time rewriting a book into the first person that she wanted to be in the third. So it's an interesting question. How close do we need to get our reader to the story? So before I answer that, I'm just going to check my comments. Hey, Nancy, nice to see you here. Great to see you here. Anybody who's watching live, please feel free to pop in the comments with your questions about this topic. It is something that I hear often from writers. They think that they can write in the first person to solve the problem of closeness. They think that if I choose writing in the first person to tell my story, I never have to worry about the problem of closeness because I'm in my main character's head. How much closer can I get? But the truth is that there is a writing craft topic that we call narrative distance. And it's something that we have to do as writers. We have to create the degree of distance and manage and choose the degree of distance between our reader and the storytelling, not just once, not just by picking first person point of view and saying, okay, I'm done with it, I'm close. No. We have to choose it every step along the way. Every sentence that we write, just as every sentence that we write is in one point of view or another, every sentence that we write chooses a distance between the storytelling and the reader. So this sounds a little, theory of relativity like what are these properties of space that I'm talking about? I'm going to use a very familiar set of examples, I hope. The movies. Let's talk about the movies, right? When you go to see a movie, you might sit there looking at the screen, and the opening shot might be a landscape. Maybe it's a desert landscape. Maybe it's a full terrain with, maybe a couple of cacti in the foreground and then some hills and then long expanse of sand taking us to the horizon. And, the moon is maybe rising over the mountains. I have a picture like this that I took on a vacation to Death Valley National Park not that long ago. And I was standing, we got up really early so that we could be there for the sunrise. And I was standing on the top of Zabriskie Point, and I took this great picture of, I was on a ledge, but there were distant people on a ledge below me. And then beyond them was the edge of the mountains. And then, the moon was setting just as the sun was rising. It was really awesome. It's what we call in movies a long shot. It is an establishing shot. It takes in a big swath of landscape. Now, in this picture that I took at dawn at Zabriskie Point in Death Valley, were there characters in it? Well, I was taking the picture, so I wasn't in it. I was in the role of the narrating consciousness, if you will. I wasn't there. It wasn't about me. It was about what was being seen through the lens of the camera. But in fact, there are figures in the picture. It has a bunch of people who are also taking pictures. It's actually a very common shot. When you take a picture at dawn at Zabriskie Point, there's 100 other people taking pictures. There's a lot of tripods out there. So there was a whole row of people taking pictures, but they weren't close to me. They were actually on a different ledge. So all I could see was sort of small figures, their backs facing to me. So there was and maybe, 20 of them in a group, each doing their thing. So I'm not in anybody's viewpoint. I'm not looking at any particular character, and I'm not signaling to my viewer that one of these figures is somehow more important than the other. If I showed you this picture and I said, who is this story about? You would not know from the picture. It's just an anonymous crowd, right, of fellow photographers. It's a long shot. It establishes setting. It might show us where we are. It might have a mood. It might convey information about what time of day it is. There's a lot in a long shot for sure. But it doesn't tell us who the story is about. Now, let's just say I wanted to write a story that was about somebody who was in that picture. What would I do? You all have cameras, right? You all have phones that take amazing pictures. If I were standing there and I spotted a particular photographer who was wearing, I don't know, a red coat, and I wanted to focus the storytelling on that person, what would I do? I would zoom in. I would use the magical zoom in feature to zoom in. And this is what we would see in a movie. We'd have a long shot to establish where we are, what time of day it is, what the weather is like, give us a mood, kind of get us in the mood. But then rather quickly, the cinematographer would zoom in so that maybe the person in the red coat and the person next to her who's in a brown coat are sort of center in the frame. Now, we don't necessarily know who they are or what they're talking about or what the story is, but we have now chosen, right? We've zoomed in, we've plucked some figures out of the crowd. What is our natural expectation once we zoom in on these characters? You've all seen a million movies. We're going to get closer. We're going to hear one of them speak. One of them is going to do something or say something. The story's about to begin because we've chosen characters, right? This is what happens at the beginning of a story. We zoom in, we've got characters. Something's going to happen. It's just what happens in a story. Now, if they start to have a conversation and both of them are included in the shot, and they're arguing about which way to point the tripod or which one forgot to bring fresh batteries for the camera, right? We can just imagine what could go on in a moment like that. The fleeting picture of Dawn, and one of them made a mistake and now they can't take the picture that they planned to take. It's conflict. Stories begin. Maybe we'll learn a lot about their relationship. Maybe they're a married couple. Maybe they're siblings. Maybe they're friends. Maybe they're on a date. Who knows, right? There's any number of stories can happen now. But we're going to see both of them. And unless we zoom in one more time, we're not going to know whose side we're on. In other words, we're still watching from the outside. This is called a medium shot. And, I'm speaking not as a film school professor, but I'm speaking kind of in general layman's terms. We've gone from the long shot to the medium shot. Now we've got characters in relationship into each other. We've got a little action going on. But the truth is, one of these characters is the protagonist of the movie. One of them is the one who we're going to follow. We're going to learn all about their inner and outer life. And in order to establish who that character is, the cinematographer is going to zoom in for a close-up. It's called a close-up. Now, in movie language, the close-up comes quite close, right? It really can get in. A person's face can fill an enormous screen. We get the subtle expressions on their face, and it creates the illusion that we know what they're thinking. Of course, we don't, but good actors have a beautiful transparency about them, and it creates both a sense that we know what they're thinking and a kind of identification, because we've been instructed by the camera movement whose side we're on, whose story we're watching. Okay, so we have these three distances. We have the long shot, we have the medium shot, and we have the close-up. Now, this is all really, great for movie making, and it's really interesting for those of you who like to take pictures. And I actually give an exercise to my Path of the Storyteller students that I freely share with you, and I hope you'll try it, is to choose a location and go out there with your camera, with your phone, and see if you can do a long shot version, a medium shot version, and a close-up version of more or less the same location. Just take those three pictures, long shot, medium shot, and close-up, without really changing where you are or what direction you're looking. Put those three pictures next to each other. They are very different, but they are pictures of the same thing. All right, now hold that thought. as writers, we not only do we do the same thing that filmmakers do, we invented it. Novels were around for far longer than movie making has been, right? We got there first. So movie makers are learning from the conceits of storytelling by reading novels. This is, they have different tools and different ways of expressing many of the things that we writers do with words, but we're doing the same thing. So how do we establish a long shot with words? I want you to think about this for a minute. How might we establish the equivalent of a long shot with words? Well, reflect back on how I described my morning at Zabriskie Point with you. It's a landscape. There's a ridge. There's some distant figures down on the ledge below. There's a valley in between, and then there's another ridge, and then there's the moon rising. I can describe it to you. I can use words to tell you what is seen from a distance. What don't I see from that distance? I don't see a lot. I don't see much about the characters, the figures who are down on the ledge below me. I don't see much of them. I might be able to tell you that there are 20, random tourists with tripods in a group, but that's what I can tell you. That is what is seen. All right. That is a long shot, and I can do it with words. Now, let's say I zoom in, and now what's in the frame? The person with the red coat and the person with the brown coat, and maybe I'm close enough to hear what they're saying, and they're having an argument about who forgot to bring the batteries for the camera. All right. That's a little scene that one could write. Okay. And if I wrote that scene with the dialogue, with the description of both of them, describing what's going on between the two of them, that's a medium shot. I've selected a focal point for my storytelling. Now, here's the groovy bit. If I know that the person in the red coat is actually the protagonist, the hero of my book, and that this trip, was a last ditch effort to decide whether, she was going to stay with her partner or not. And now they're having a fight, and there's so much at stake, right? They've been fighting. This was it. This was going to be what was supposed to bring them back together or not. So much is at stake. How do I reveal that to the reader? Oh, I go inside her head. I share the backstory from her perspective. I go into her inner monologue. I zoom in close. I zoom in close to her. I can zoom in as a writer far closer than a filmmaker can zoom in with a camera, because I have the power to actually go into the character's consciousness. I can depict what's going on in their mind, inside their body, right? If they've got a cramp in their foot, I know it because I am the narrator of the story. I can depict it from their experience. No one else knows it, but I know it, right? As the storyteller. So as soon as I start to put in those details, those musings, that consciousness, the feelings, the physical sensations, the sensory details that only that character can possibly know, I am writing in close-up. I am writing from a close point of view. So I have at my disposal as a writer long shots, medium shots, and close-ups. This is narrative distance. Why is it so important? Well, imagine, if you will, a movie. If you went to the movies and you saw a movie and the entire movie was long shots. It was just one panorama after another. It would be like a travelogue, and not even a very good one, right? Because there's only so many distant landscapes we can stay engaged with, no matter how beautiful they are. It's just like a slideshow from somebody else's vacation, and they never zoomed in. So it's all the same. There's a sameness about it. They might be great images, but there's a sameness about them. It's long shot after long shot after long shot after long shot. What never happens storytelling, right? There's no story. There's nothing to grab onto in terms of who am I relating to? What's about to happen? We don't engage any expectations from the viewer or the reader about what might happen next because nothing's happening. We're just showing them landscapes. If we zoom in and we get into the middle distance, then we're describing a couple of characters, perhaps in terms of a visual image. It's sort of like a shot from the waist up, like you might have a whole person in it. Usually it's, a grouping of 2 or 3 characters. It's just enough to create a sense of, oh, this is where the scene is happening. This is where the storytelling is happening. We can do that with writing easily. We can describe from a closer distance, and now we can see, the what they're wearing. We get a sense of how old they are. We can hear what they're saying. We can include dialogue. We can write a fully blown scene from the middle distance. But we don't really know what's at stake until we go close. We don't really know who the protagonist is and what their journey, their badly needed journey of spiritual transformation is until we go in close. And that's why you will see the progression of long, medium, close over and over and over again in movie making and in well-crafted fiction. If we get stuck in one distance, if we write only long shots, it's a boring travelogue. If we write only close-ups, we're always sort of looking up somebody's nose. You know what I mean? It's like we're always very close to the action. It's kind of claustrophobic. We don't get any perspective. We don't get a scene between 2 characters. We don't get a sense of the world that they're in, right? So that is also an extremely limited thing to do. What if we say, I don't want to bother switching. I'll just write everything from the middle. Well, my friends, I'm here to tell you that it is one of the hallmarks of inexperienced writing that the majority of the storytelling, if not all of it, is just stuck in that middle distance. This is what we do when we don't know better. And if this is not meant as a criticism, because writing is a very complicated craft. It needs to be learned, and it is almost essential that you have a mentor or a teacher to show you the way. Otherwise, you are reinventing the wheel. If you sat down to, someone gave you a violin and a bow and said, here, play. I mean, you might figure out how to play the violin without a teacher, but it would take you, if it happened at all, it would take you a very long time. Writing fiction is no less complex. All right. So, I don't say this as a criticism. I just say it as an observation that until writers are truly trained and skilled and aware, kind of awake to the writing craft topic of narrative distance, the overwhelming tendency is to simply write everything from the middle. It's sort of like those movie versions or filmed versions of plays that take place on a stage, and the camera is fixed and it takes in the play, but it doesn't move. And so we have this very stagey, there's the word, we have this very stagey action, and it may be a fantastic play and the actors may be incredible, but it's not the same experience as watching something that was written for the movies and shot like a movie, where the camera moves, where the camera can go out and then in again for a close-up. The storytelling is completely different, and the experience of the viewer is completely different. Likewise, if you as a writer write everything from the middle distance because it's kind of a safe choice. I'm thinking of when I learned to drive now, and my driving instructor said, just stay in what he called the lane of indecision. If you're not sure if the exit is going to be on the right or the exit is going to be on the left, Stay in the middle. It's the lane of indecision. I've always thought that was kind of an interesting phrase, and it applies to writing because when we don't know how to do something, we tend to stay in the lane of indecision. And when it comes to narrative distance, that's the middle. Now, think of now the consequences of writing from the middle. Is it vivid? Is it dynamic? Or does it feel a little bit the same? Is there a sameness about it? Is there a kind of staginess about it, a flatness about it? We are always keeping our reader at arm's length if we stay stuck in the middle. So that is the issue of narrative distance, which I offer to you to really contemplate. And I want you to be aware of it now. In your own reading and your own writing, and also if you're in your viewing of any kind of cinema, anything that's shot professionally and edited professionally, a movie or a television show, I want you to start paying attention to not only how often the distance changes, but why it changes. There's always a reason, right? We are in a new scene. We have to establish where we are. There's a lot of people around. We have to establish who the scene is about. There's a main character. We have to establish who it is. So that movement of the camera toward the story, like the camera looks where the story is, and we must do the same in our writing. We must learn to change the distance from which we're describing to follow where the storytelling is. We establish the setting. We zoom in on what's happening, and then we pop into a close relationship with our viewpoint character, who will almost always be the protagonist. Not 100% of the time, but almost always. All right, let's pull up a couple of questions. Nancy's just shared a good one. Is the medium shot equivalent to telling and not showing? Interesting. So the instruction to show, not tell, is one that most writers can recite by heart, but not so many can clearly explain. There remain a lot of questions about it. Nancy, to me, first of all, let me just say it's an intelligent question. It's a very good question. And the answer when it comes to writing craft is that there is always a relationship between writing craft topics, right? Because in the end of the day, it all works together, just like playing the violin. Like, is it about pitch, or is it about tempo, or is it about, or volume? It's like at the end of the day, you need all of these things to make it sound like music. So there is absolutely a relationship between all of these things, but it's not the equivalent. It's not what I would call the equivalent. To me, you can show from any distance. So the difference between telling and showing, telling is when the writer is using descriptive words to kind of interpret what's happening emotionally. If I tell you the woman in the red coat is angry that her partner forgot the batteries for the camera, I'm telling you. If I show you the woman in the red coat knocking the tripod over and walking off in a huff, I've shown you that she's angry, but I've never used the word anger. All right. So that's the difference between showing and telling. I can depict that same scene from any distance, as long as it's plausible that what I'm showing can be seen from that distance. If I'm 2 miles away, I can't see it, perhaps, right? But if I'm just standing, as I was, on the ledge, above the ledge where this alleged incident, see what I did there, happened, I'm going to be able to notice that in this crowd of people that I don't know, these nameless crowd of photographers, that there's a couple who are starting to gesticulate, that there's fingers being wagged, and that at one point the one in the red coat knocks over the tripod and storms off. I will be able to see that even if I have not zoomed in yet, because it's enough. I'm close enough to see it, but I don't know who these people are. I don't know anything about them, and I they're drawing attention to themselves, but I haven't zoomed in yet. Now, if I zoom in and I'm in a medium shot, what becomes available to me then is their names. What are they saying to each other? What's their relationship? I can start to introduce lots of information in a medium shot, right? But what is not yet available to me until I zoom in close on the one in the red coat is how much this trip meant to her, and how important it was that they get along, and how this is the last straw and she's about to go get back in the car and, drive home. Like, I don't know what's going on inside her until I zoom in and give a view of her consciousness, her train of thought, her history, her feelings. That is the closeness that characterizes a close-up in fiction. At that point, I'm going to take a sip now because you can see I'm getting a little excited just thinking about this. This poor couple. If only they brought the batteries, it never would have happened. So, so now I have choices about how I choose the distance to show. So to go back to your point, Nancy, like, we should always be showing, but from what distance are we showing, right? From what distance are we showing? Now, we can do a whole other conversation about the show versus tell question. I promise we'll do that. I know it's a question that comes up a lot, but just know that from my perspective, even though I say we should always be showing, yes, we should always be showing the important things. We should always be showing the storytelling. But there are many times when it is appropriate to summarize little bits of connective tissue between important scenes. And that is, in fact, when telling, is the perfectly right thing to do. So we'll dive into the nuances of that in another discussion. I think it's a really good point, to address. So showing, here's an exercise. Once you've got those 3 photos that I told you to take, that I urged you to take, and you put them next to each other and you really look at how much fits in the frame of each of those photos at each of those distances, I want you to challenge yourself, just as an exercise, as I give my Path of the Storyteller students, to use words to convey what's in each of those 3 photos. Use words to convey what can be seen in the long shot. What information is evident? You'll end up talking about, in my example, the mountains in the sky and the moon and the crowd down below, right? Maybe you'll convey a sense of spookiness or a sense of grandeur. You can put whatever tone or mood in it you want to, but the details that you have at your disposal will be those details that can plausibly be seen at that distance. Then you'll go to the medium shot that you took. And you'll see that even though the camera is pointed in the same direction, because you've zoomed in, you've selected something. You've selected some characters. You've selected some objects. The camera is now interested in something particular. It has created like a circle of, this is what's interesting. This is what we're going to look at. And to the reader who is fluent in storytelling, we're all fluent in storytelling. It's part of our birthright. The reader right away will know, oh, that's what the story is going to be about. As soon as you draw a little circle, even if we don't yet know who it is, that's what the story is going to be about. And they wake up. They're interested. They want to know what happens. Now look at the shot that you took where you zoomed in all the way. How close can you get? Now, if you're lucky, there was something suitable for a protagonist, for playing the role of protagonist. But, if it's just a nature shot, maybe there's a bird, maybe there's an animal, you can choose something in that shot that and endow it with the role of protagonist. And now in your close-up version, where you've really zoomed in on that one thing, let's hope it's a living creature, unless you want to, imagine a rock or something like that as your protagonist. It has been done, I'm sure. Everything's been done by someone at some point. Now what can you share? Now it's not so much a matter of depicting what is seen from a very close distance. Yes, you can describe the dilation of the pupil of an eye. if you're that close, that kind of observed detail becomes available to you. But what we really mean by close is getting inside the consciousness, the sensations, the thought process, the emotional state of the viewpoint character. That's what we mean by close. Most of your storytelling will be close. Why? Because whose story is it? It's the protagonist's story. That's what the reader has come for. The reader has come for the story as experienced through a kind of a identification with a character who is revealed to them, whose consciousness has been sort of flung open like a set of French doors so that the reader can come in and take that ride along with the character. So it just goes without too much argument, I hope, that if that's what the reader is there for, by definition, most of your storytelling should be from a rather close vantage point, right? We use long shots to establish where we are. There's all kinds of reasons to use a long shot. We use medium shots to depict, crowd scenes and little conversations and stuff like that. But then we zoom in close. Now, how often do we change the distance? Well, this is homework for you because I want you to watch next time you watch a movie. How often does the camera move? How often does it get further, get closer, maybe go from one character to another? It's constantly moving. You're going to find that it's constantly moving. If the camera stays still too long, we notice it. And that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that that filmmaker has chosen to do something stagey, to do something theatrical, to hold the camera still and let a scene just play out between the actors. But we do notice it after a while because it's a bold choice. So likewise, your distance should be very fluid. And you will find that once you start to think about it, you're going to become very aware of zooming in, pulling back, zooming in, pulling back. Here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to do it for no reason, and you don't want to do it constantly and randomly. Like, you don't want to go from long shots to close-ups to medium to long shots to close-up. You don't want to just, you're careening out of the lane of indecision, but now you're swerving back and forth between the right lane and the left lane, cutting off traffic, right? Now you're creating chaos in the reader's mind. So think about what you're trying to accomplish. If it's a scene between two characters, you're probably going to be toggling back and forth between medium and close quite a bit. Maybe every now and then you'll take a long shot just to check in with what's going on in the larger environment. Maybe they've started to shout and people in the next room are, craning their heads in. Like, you can imagine all the reasons that you would have to move your distance. But embedded in the storytelling, what are you trying to communicate? All right. So that is a bit of a summary of narrative distance. It's a complicated topic, and the most important thing, and really what my goal is for today, is to make you aware of it. Because if you're not aware of it, you may intuitively been doing some movement of distance, but it's also possible that you've just been writing from the middle and you're not zooming in close enough. I want to see if anybody's got any more questions. Please pop them in now, because there's one more thing I want to address: point of view and how it relates to this. And after that, we'll be done, except for your questions. So back to my my student who had this predicament that I started out talking about, who got advice from an agent who said, "Oh, this is okay, but I'd rather see it in the first person point of view." I feel quite certain that what that agent was saying is, or was, you're writing from the middle all the time. You need to zoom in. I don't feel close enough to your main character. Oh, if only that agent had known to say that. We cannot rely on agents and even editors, and I say this with a lot of respect for what editors do, but we cannot rely upon them to have the training in writing craft that writers have, because that's not what their job is. They are good observers of their own experience, as every reader is. And if they say, it didn't grab me, I didn't feel close to the main character, I don't know why, I just never got into it. You see how the language kind of betrays it. I just couldn't get into it. Yes, you literally couldn't get into it because that close-up, the French doors that swing open and let you into the consciousness of the protagonist never opened. They were locked, or they too rarely opened. So we have to think about it being our responsibility. Yet the advice to say, oh, well, you can write it in the first person and that will fix it is not a sure thing. It's a little challenging to talk about without lots and lots of examples. But I will say that writing in the first person does not necessarily solve the problem of narrative distance, because you still have to do the same thing. You don't want to take an entire story, a novel-length story, and shoot the whole thing in a close-up, right? That would be weird. And so first person point of view creates, in a sense, like the illusion of being close, because it's always this other person talking to us. But honestly, think about your life and your interactions with other people. You can have long conversations with other people, right? And not feel close to them. You can talk for hours. You can be trapped on a train, with a total stranger for hours, and they could regale you with all kinds of stuff, and you don't feel close to them because they're not sharing, right? They're pontificating about thing. They're spreading gossip. They're wisecracking. They're just cracking jokes the whole time, or they're doing other things than open up the French doors to their intimate consciousness. We don't necessarily want people to do that on a train. It depends what mood we're in. So a person can be talking and expose nothing, is my point. You can hear somebody talking to you and not feel close to them. And how do we feel if we're trapped at a party next to someone who's just talking and talking and we don't feel close to them? We can't wait to get away. It's supremely irritating, right? Or is that just me? So think about that, and then think about how first person is no guarantee of closeness, of a bond with the reader. It's not. You still have to do it. You still have to create the story through long, medium, and close-up shots. Somewhere the first person narrator will be observing the landscape, the surroundings. They will be, I was behind the camera, right, taking that picture in Death Valley. They'll be behind the camera describing what they see without putting their own, musings into it. That's a long shot. Then they'll zoom in on something else. But then when they really start to get into their own perceptions about it in an authentic way, then we're in close-up. So you still have to do the work first person. Does that mean that third person is not as close as first person? Oh, no, it does not mean that. I'm here to tell you that the principle of distance and being close to the protagonist is the same, whether you're writing in first person or third person. Third person point of view has a register. I know we've talked about it a little bit. Third person point of view has a gear that you can shift into that we call close third person point of view. And in a close third person point of view, guess what you're doing? You're being close. To whom? The viewpoint character. So the close third person point of view has the same relationship to the viewpoint character that first person point of view has to its narrating character. And all of the same requirements apply. You still have to really open the gates to intimacy, to what's going on inside that character's mind, heart, physical sensations. The same details are really important, of course, because if I tell you, that I'm, my nose is getting a little itchy right now because my cat just walked into the room. Going on in my body, you wouldn't really know that unless I told you. So all of a sudden, it's from my point of view. It just they're my sensations. I am the authority on them. We're doing what's in. It's different than what's going on in the person next to me. The senses, by definition, locate us in one character. That's whose sensory experience is being relayed. So sensory detail is a great tool to help be specific about who your viewpoint character is. But every about the story is like it's the lens of the cat, and character, whether in first person or third person, is that camera. It's what they're perceiving, they're experiencing, the information that they're perceiving affects. How does it impact the storytelling? Is it good news or bad news? Did they just get a clue? Are they discovering something that matters to the story, right? Is it a setback, or is this a stroke of luck? Everything that they perceive has to do with the story. So it will have a meaning beyond just information. More talk about narrative distance, point of what makes it feel close, medium, and long. All right. So if you guys have questions, let me just double check. I don't see any. All right. I'm going to be super interested to know if you actually do that exercise with taking the 3 photos and then putting them next to each other and trying to use words to convey what is seen in each of those 3 photos. If you do it, I would love for you to share. You can leave a comment below here on the YouTube channel. If you leave a comment below the video, I will and I'd love to see what you have to say and answer it. If you're watching from the Path of the Storyteller Facebook group, you could even post your photos. I would love to see them and see what you wrote about them. That would be awesome. Okay. As always, thank you guys so much for coming. If you liked this video and you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, I hope you will subscribe. It's great to be able to let you know what's coming up week after week as I come back here to share talk about writing craft and story structure. If you've got a subject that you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments and we'll weave it into a future Wednesday. And if you're not on my mailing list, please join up. It's www.pathofthestoryteller.com. And I'd love to have you on there. So there's even more stuff that I can share with you by email. Thank you all for coming and thanks for your comments. It's always a pleasure. I'll see you next time.